Do you know what it means for a club like Real Madrid for a world-class coach to say no? We are not talking about any coach. We are talking about Jürgen Klopp, a man who has won absolutely everything, who has built legendary teams, who has turned broken projects into winning machines, and that man has just shut Florentino Pérez's nose. But what is truly stunning about this story is not the rejection. It is the reason. Because Klopp has not said no for money, nor for a sporting project, not even because he prefers to rest a little more after his departure from Liverpool, right? Klopp has said no because he considers that coaching Real Madrid right now is a professional suicide, and he has pointed out directly to two players as the culprits of that toxic situation that no one with two fingers in front would like to get into. We are facing one of the most serious internal crises that Real Madrid has experienced in decades, and the incredible thing is that almost no one is telling this story. But we are going to tell it here, in its entirety, from the beginning, because what is happening in the offices of Santiago Bernabéu is something that any football fan deserves to know. It all started weeks ago, when within the club it was already assumed that Arbeloa's thing was not working. Defeats were accumulating, results were not coming, and worst of all, the dressing room seemed completely disconnected from the coach. There was something broken inside, something that went far beyond tactics or game systems. Florentino Pérez is a man who has been directing Real Madrid for decades. He has lived through crises. He has made very tough decisions. But this time the situation has caught him at a very delicate moment, because the first name that sounded to replace Arbeloa was Unai Emery, a Spanish coach, with experience, with prestige, someone who knows La Liga perfectly well and who had just had a spectacular season with Aston Villa. Real Madrid saw a sign, sat down with Emery. There were contacts, long conversations, but in the end, Emery also said no. And that first rejection left Florentino with a very bitter feeling, because Emery is an educated man, correct, but in private, he dropped something that began to worry within the club, something related to the internal situation of the dressing room, with the egos, with the problems of coexistence that are in there. That was the first warning, but Florentino did not want to give too much importance. He thought that perhaps Emery was simply comfortable in England, that he did not want to return to Spain, that he preferred to continue his project at Aston Villa. So the president of Real Madrid decided to go for an even bigger name, a coach who would change everything all at once, someone with so much weight that his simple arrival was capable of putting any player in trouble, no matter how star he was. And that name was Jürgen Klopp. Klopp had just left Liverpool after almost 9 years. 9 years building a brutal team, winning the Premier League, winning the Champions League, making Liverpool, which was in the cradle, one of the most respected teams in Europe. And he had done it with personality, with character, with a way of training that imposed absolute respect within the dressing room. Florentino saw in Klopp the perfect solution, a coach with authority, with international prestige, someone to whom Vinicius, Mbappé, Bellingham, or any star in the dressing room would have to lower their heads and work without whining. Because Klopp is not one of those who negotiate with footballers. Klopp rules, and whoever does not want to follow his rules sits on the bench. That's simple. Real Madrid prepared a millionaire offer, something never seen before, a contract that would make Klopp the best-paid coach in the entire league, even above Cholo Simeone, who has been the coach with the highest salary in Spain for years. We are talking about stratospheric figures, so much so that within the club there were people who were surprised at the amount of money that Florentino was willing to put on the table. But the money was not the only thing, because Florentino also gave Klopp something that very few coaches get in Real Madrid: absolute power over the dressing room, white card to make sports decisions, and the promise that the club would make the signings that he considered necessary for his project to work. And Klopp had very clear ideas. He wanted to reinforce the attack. He needed an unbalancing extreme, someone who would provide speed, goal, and defensive commitment. And the name he put on the table was that of Luis Diaz, his former Liverpool player, a spectacular Colombian, who had been one of the key pieces in Klopp's scheme in recent years. Real Madrid accepted, without complaining. Florentino was willing to do whatever was necessary for Klopp to say yes. Because having Klopp at Bernabéu was not just signing a coach, it was sending a message to the whole world. It was saying that Real Madrid was still the biggest club on the planet, that any coach in the world dreamed of training there, and that when Madrid calls, no one says no. But it turns out that Klopp did say no. And the way he did it was devastating. Because Klopp did not reject the offer by phone, he did not send an educated message through his representative. No, Klopp asked for a personal meeting with Florentino Pérez, face-to-face, because he wanted to explain in person why he was not going to accept the offer from Real Madrid. That meeting took place a few days ago, in a discreet place, far from the spotlight, far from the press. Florentino was convinced that he was going to close the signing. He thought that Klopp simply wanted to negotiate some detail of the contract, perhaps ask for more control over the sporting direction, or make sure that he would have enough budget to make the signings he needed. But Klopp did not want to negotiate anything. Klopp came to that meeting to say just one thing, no? And what came next left Florentino Pérez frozen. Because Klopp began to talk about Real Madrid in a way that no one had dared to do in a long time. He talked about the locker room, the internal situation, the problems he had detected simply by looking at the games from the outside, and above all he talked about two players, Vinicius and Mbappe. According to Klopp, these two players represent everything he considers toxic within a locker room. Uncontrolled egos, lack of defensive commitment, attitudes that generate divisions within the group, and above all, a constant feeling that they are above the coach, that no one can touch them, that whatever they do, they will always be untouchable. Klopp was very clear. He told Florentino that coaching Real Madrid in those conditions was a mistake, that any coach who got there with that situation in the locker room was going to end up burned, destroyed, with his reputation on the ground. Because no matter how good you are as a coach, if you have two players who do not accept authority and also have the total backing of the board, you are finished before you start. And then Klopp said something that, according to the people who were close to that conversation, was the hardest of all. He said that he had built his career working with united teams, with committed footballers, with healthy locker rooms, where everyone was going in the same direction, and that he was not willing to destroy all that by getting into a project where from day one he was going to have to deal with egos that no one can control. Florentino heard all that in silence. He tried to argue. He tried to convince Klopp that things were not so serious, that Vinicius and Mbappe were great players, that they simply needed someone with authority who knew how to handle them. But Klopp was not convinced, because Klopp knows perfectly well what it is to work with stars. In Liverpool he had Salah, Van Dijk, top-level footballers, but he never allowed any of them to be above the team. And there is the difference. In Liverpool Klopp ruled, in Real Madrid, according to his perception, the players rule. And that for a coach like Klopp is unacceptable. The meeting ended in the worst possible way for Florentino. Klopp left thanking the interest, being polite, but making it perfectly clear that he was not going to coach Real Madrid. And Florentino sat there, assimilating what he had just heard. Because this was not just a rejection, it was a brutal diagnosis of the club's state, of the internal problems it has been dragging on for months, of a situation that seems increasingly difficult to fix. And worst of all, there are already two. First Emery, now Klopp. Two important coaches who have said no to Real Madrid. Two coaches who have seen something in that dressing room that has made them run. Inside Real Madrid right now, there is an uncomfortable silence. That kind of silence that appears when something has really broken, when it is no longer just about sports results, when the problem goes far beyond winning or losing games. Because what is happening in the white dressing room is something that transcends football. It is a problem of power, of egos, of structures that have become ungovernable. And Florentino Pérez knows it. The president of Real Madrid has been handling complicated situations for decades. He has dealt with the biggest stars in world football. He has managed changing rooms full of Galacticos. He has made very tough decisions, such as firing legendary coaches or selling players who seemed untouchable. But this time the situation is different. Because this time the problem does not come from outside, it comes from within. And every day that passes, it gets bigger. Let's think about what it really means that Klopp has said no. We are not talking about any coach. Klopp is someone who has shown for years that he knows how to build winning teams, that he knows how to put the stars on the belt, that he has the personality necessary to prevail in any dressing room. And that man considers that Real Madrid is an unfeasible project, that the dressing room is so polluted that not even he, with all his experience, could fix it. That is devastating. Because if Klopp does not dare, who will dare? What coach with two fingers in front will want to get into that abyss, knowing that he has all the papers to come out on top? Florentino has run out of options. And the worst thing is that now everyone in the world of football is going to know why Klopp rejected Real Madrid. Those things are leaked. They are discussed in the offices, in the dinners between agents, in private conversations between managers. And the message that is going to reach all the important coaches on the planet is very clear. Real Madrid has a big problem. And that problem is called Vinicius and Mbappe. Let's talk about this clearly, because it is important to understand what is really going on inside that dressing room. Vinicius arrived at Real Madrid being almost a child, with a lot of talent, but also with a very strong personality. For years, he has been one of the most important players on the team. He has scored decisive goals, he has won titles, he has become a world star. But he has also generated problems. Many problems. His attitude inside the field sometimes touches the unbearable. Constant protests, simulations, fights with referees. All this has created a very tense atmosphere around the team. And inside the dressing room, he is not exactly an example of companionship. There are players who do not support his way of acting, who consider that Vinicius believes above all, that he does not accept criticism, that when things do not go well, he always blames others. But the really serious thing is that Vinicius is untouchable. Florentino protects him as if he were his son. No coach can touch him. No teammate can question him. And that generates a brutal imbalance within the group. Because when you have a player who knows that whatever he does, he will continue to be a starter, that whatever he wins, he will always have the support of the board, that player becomes ungovernable. And then there is Mbappe. Mbappe's arrival at Real Madrid was presented as the signing of the century. The signing that was going to return Madrid to the top. The most desired footballer on the planet, signing for the largest club in the world. Florentino rubbed his hands, thinking he had closed the operation of his life. But the reality has been very different. Mbappe arrived at Real Madrid with demands that had never been seen in the history of the club. A stratospheric salary, millionaire